But if one employee or just one patron had a gun aimed at the opposite direction, and it would have been a whole different story. The terrorists would have fled or been shot.
Prioritizing homegrown defense. As President Trump slides into the picture, French President Emmanuel Macron has called on European nations to focus their increased military spending on bolstering domestic defense industries, rather than primarily purchasing American-made weapons. Speaking during his New Year address to military leaders, Macron emphasized the need for Europe to strengthen its defense capabilities while reducing reliance on foreign suppliers, particularly the United States. Macron expressed concern over the billions of euros allocated to military budgets across Europe, stating that these investments often benefit American industries, jobs, and economic growth rather than fostering European self-reliance. He highlighted that when countries agree to spend more on defense, it frequently translates to acquiring U.S. weaponry instead of supporting local industries. The French leader's remarks reflect long-standing frustrations, particularly given France's robust defense sector. Macron pointed to Germany's 2022 decision to establish the European Sky Shield air defense system using U.S. and Israeli technology rather than Franco-Italian alternative. Such choices, he suggested, undermine the goal of developing a unified and competitive European defense industry. Macron also stressed the inefficiencies within Europe's defense sector, noting the continent has 47 different industrial platforms for naval production compared to just 6 in the U.S. He called for streamlined collaboration and joint European weapons development, even if France does not lead such efforts. He underscored the importance of creating European defense champions with global reach. Acknowledging France's leadership in Europe's military capabilities, Macron stated that the country meets NATO's defense spending target of 2% of GDP. However, he warned that 2% may not suffice, given escalating global instability. Macron also voiced concerns about the potential reduction of U.S. troop presence in Europe, emphasizing the importance of self-sufficiency. Turning to broader security challenges, Macron highlighted Russia's ongoing threat to Europe and the world, even in the event of a resolution to the war in Ukraine. He argued that peace in Europe would only be achievable with active European involvement at the negotiating table. While referencing U.S. President Donald Trump's promise to end the Ukraine war within 24 hours, Macron cautioned against expecting a swift resolution, emphasizing the long-term nature of such conflicts.
This person cannot assume the responsibility to deal with a problem like this all alone. If someone had a gun, maybe it would still have been a massacre and it would have created tensions.
Europe braces for Trump 2.0. Europe has been heavily focused on Donald Trump since he won the U.S. presidential election in November, despite facing domestic difficulties and a stagnant economy. European leaders are now reflecting on the continent's vulnerabilities, as many fear Trump 2.0 could be worse. Traditional powers like France and Germany are already struggling with their own problems, while the EU as a whole lags behind China and the U.S. in terms of competitiveness. Trump acts more like a transactional businessman than a U.S. statesman, who prizes transatlantic alliances dating back to World War II. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel experienced Trump last time he was in office and concluded that he views the world through the prism of winners and losers. She concluded that Europe has taken advantage of the U.S. for years and that has got to stop. Leaders in Europe have watched open-mouthed Trump's public land-based allies in Europe and Canada, rather than focus his ire on those he recognizes as a strategic threat, like China. Trump dangles the possibility of abandoning NATO, the transatlantic military alliance that Europe has relied on for its security for decades. He has said he would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want with European allies if they don't pay their way more and boost their defense spending. When it comes to trade, Trump is clearly as livid with the EU now as he was during his first term in office. The bloc sells far more to the United States than it imports from the U.S. In January 2022, the trade surplus was 15.4 billion euros. Donald Trump's answer? He will impose blanket tariffs on all foreign imports of 10 to 20%, with even higher tariffs on certain goods like cars. This is a disaster scenario for Germany, which relies on exports and the automobile industry in particular. As the biggest economy in the Eurozone, Financial difficulties in Germany risk affecting the currency as a whole.
It's so bizarre to see foreign leaders trying to talk to the president the way Newt Gingrich and Chris Christie do on TV.
I think Macron has figured out how to manage Trump. He'll listen to that. I think he also liked the parade. The president has not wanted to do anything in terms of securing the elections for whatever reasons.
Germany is top of Trump's hit list, according to former German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Ian Bond, the deputy director for the Center for European Reform, believes the country will remain top of Trump's European hit list. Angela Merkel has said that Donald Trump appeared to have it in for Germany when he was last in office, but she wouldn't be holding her breath. The UK hopes to avoid Trump's tariffs, as it doesn't have such a trade imbalance with the US, but it may well get lashed by tailwinds if it comes to an EU-US trade war. Trump's bullying style has left Europe with a real conundrum. How much is bluster and intimidation, and how much is a promise of action? Vice President Ian Lesser, vice president at the German Marshall Fund of the United States think tank, believes Trump's tariff threats are real and that Europe is far from ready. Trump has proposed imposing blanket tariffs of 10 to 20% on all foreign imports, with higher rates on goods like cars. The European Commission claims to be ready for any number of moves by Trump when he returns to the White House. However, Lesser says the biggest impact on Europe could come if Trump launches an aggressive trade war against China, which could result in supply chain disruptions for Europe and Beijing dumping even more cheap products on European markets, to the detriment of local businesses. Trade, defense, and the Musk factor complicate things further. Trump and his administration are not separate issues. He recently refused to rule out economic and/or military action against EU and NATO member Denmark if it didn't hand over the autonomous territory Greenland to the U.S. Trump's incoming vice president appeared to make U.S. defense of Europe conditional on EU regulatory bodies stepping away from the social platform X. J.D. Vance warned the U.S. could pull its support for NATO if the EU continued a long-standing investigation into X, which is owned by Trump's golden boy, Elon Musk.
But it is nowhere near on a scale of the deaths that we see from gun crime in America. Have a problem with knife crime, it is true, as we do across the country. So I would like Donald Trump to come here. I'd like him to see what a fantastic city we actually are.
Europe's fragile unity. Trump and Elon Musk are widely distrusted in Europe, as illustrated in a new poll commissioned by the European Council of Foreign Relations, entitled The EU and Global Public Opinion After the U.S. Elections. Different European leaders have different approaches to taming the Trump, as insiders describe attempts. Some flatter Trump's not exactly tiny ego, such as French President Emmanuel Macron, who was one of the first world leaders to congratulate him on social media after his re-election in November, and invited him to attend the glittering and dignitary resplendent reopening of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. Others in Europe favor flashing the cash, with European Central Bank Chief Christine Lagarde advising Europe's leaders to adopt a checkbook strategy and negotiate with Trump rather than retaliate against his proposed tariffs. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, speaks of buying more expensive U.S. liquefied natural gas as part of Europe's effort to diversify its energy supplies. Emmanuel Macron, former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and Donald Trump have all advocated for Europe to become more self-sufficient in order to survive. The COVID pandemic exposed Europe's dependence on Chinese imports, such as medicines, and the invasion of Ukraine exposed Europe's over-reliance on Russian energy. Macron now warns that the U.S. has two priorities, the USA first and the China issue second. The European issue is not a geopolitical priority for the coming years and decades.
Those are areas where there are no guns. I don't know where those gun-free zones are. That's why I carry concealed, so that I can protect myself, I can protect my family who might be with me.
They are the most dangerous places, gun-free zones. It's true. I just don't think you're going to get it approved. You're not going to get concealed carry approved.
Concealed carry issue of national reciprocity.
As far as I'm concerned, I would, and I would do it with the military. In fact, I'm looking to get rid of gun-free zones in the military.
Trump's return to the White House is making European leaders think about continental weaknesses. In terms of defense, Trump's insistence that Europe spend more is generally accepted, but Europeans are discussing how to spend their defense budgets more wisely and in a more joined-up way to boost continental safety. Macron wants an EU-wide industrial defense policy, as the war in Ukraine illustrated that our fragmentation is a weakness. Concerns grow that Trump may reduce military aid to Ukraine, in contrast to the strong backing from the Biden administration. Europe worries that Trump will not want to continue being the main sponsor of military aid to Ukraine, as was the case under the Biden administration. Next month, EU leaders have invited the UK to an informal summit to discuss working together better on security and defense. The EU's defense chief and former Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas believes European unity of purpose is needed. Europe today is in a weaker, more fractured state to deal with Trump 2.0 than it was in 2016 when he was first elected. Economic growth is sluggish and politics are volatile. Populist, nationalist, Eurosceptic parties are gaining strength in many European countries, with some like Germany's AfD being soft on Moscow, and others like Italian PM Giorgia Meloni may be tempted to prioritize transatlantic ties with Trump rather than European unity.
Recently read a story that in London is like a war zone for horrible stabbing wounds. They don't have guns.
Financially, Northern Europe was doing better than it is now, but in terms of unity, the continent was deeply divided on the back of the migrant crisis in 2015. Populist Eurosceptic parties were also on the rise then, and following the Brexit vote in June 2016, there were widespread predictions the EU would soon lose other member countries and fall apart altogether. Fast forward to 2025, the EU has weathered Brexit, the COVID pandemic, the migration crisis, and Trump's first term in office, and countries have pulled together after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.